Welcome to the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast.
Well, then Perez has got the better of it, and he looks to get the better of Schmeichel, and he's done it. Wilson's going to fall here for Alexis.
Twitter experiences massive data anomaly as millions of Arsenal fans rush to delete anti-Mesut Ozil tweets. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Just your run-of-the-mill 5-0 victory, folks, as the Arsenal home juggernaut chugs along. I think, obviously, we'd be doing even better at home if it weren't for the negative fan behavior, which drags the team down. But despite that, the team soldiers on. And Mesut Ozil, good at football, turns out. So 3 weeks ago, when everyone was telling me, play Iwobi, stick Ozil in the reserves, we don't need him, I guess, and I'm just hypothesizing here, that may not have been a good take. Here to provide more not good takes, brilliant takes, Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stilberto. Hello, Stilberto.
Hello there.
Hello there indeed. And Clive, he's on Twitter at Clive, PAFC. Clive, buonasera.
Hello, hello.
That's right. Did I say that right, Tim? Buonasera?
I don't know. I don't speak Spanish.
I don't. Is that Spanish?
Yeah.
It is? No, it's not.
Yeah.
Isn't it something else? No? It's Portuguese, isn't it?
No, Portuguese is bom dia.
Oh, you know what? Fine. I apologize to whatever nationality and language-speaking people I've offended. I clearly don't know what I said, but I think it is good evening. I'm pretty sure it is in whatever language it is. In any event, je parle un peu de français. Anyway, so, yeah, good game. Good game. I think we're all pleased with it. So let's get to Scott. We'll do the stat section and say goodbye. No, I'm kidding. Clive is here. Tim is here. Paul is not here because I guess he wanked himself to death. So we'll see. All right. So, Tim, I think, the interesting question that we debated at length in the last pod was what rotation was the right amount of rotation and how much he would rotate. And I was kind of the opinion, go get the 3 points in front of you, because nothing's guaranteed, and you might as well get these 3 points. And the manager agreed, and he started full strength. How surprised were you that he started full strength, and did you have any reservations about him doing that?
I don't know how surprised I was, because I really, really didn't know how he was going to play this. I really didn't think there'd be wholesale changes. I thought maybe he might look at Koscielny and give Holding a game, and he might, he might look at Aaron Ramsey, and Lord knows what he'd have done there, because the other options aren't that appealing. And I thought maybe he'll look at Lacazette. I didn't think he'd do all three of those at once, maybe two at the most, but I thought maybe he'd consider a couple of those. I didn't actually think Ozil would play. I'm incredibly grateful that he did. So yeah, I didn't really have a feel for how he was going to go for this. I didn't have an awful lot of trepidation about it, to be honest, because we haven't had Champions League football this year, so that team is relatively fresh. I think this is the first midweek kind of Premier League fixture of the season, so really it's the first time they've been asked to play without a 7-day break. And maybe as a fan base we're a bit more nervous about that this season than usual, because it's not been the every 3 days that we're used to. It's been, we've been used to at least a week's rest. I think maybe Arsenal would have looked at the fact that in the recent international break, a lot of the players didn't go away, or they only played one game, or didn't cover much distance. And so he probably took that into account and just thought, well, you know what, like you say, let's just take the 3 points that are in front of us, because there's certainly no guarantee we'll get them on Saturday. So I didn't have an awful lot of trepidation. Maybe in hindsight, you could look at Lacazette and say this is the first time he's been asked to play twice in a week, and he's gone off injured at half-time. And maybe those of you that were doing all that booing when he was being substituted, maybe the manager knew what he was talking about there.
Have a look at yourself, people. Have a look at yourself. Come on, guys. Trust in Arsenal we trust. Come on.
Aside from the fact that he was very, very, very visibly absolutely wiped out after 55 minutes every week, which should have been a clue. But yeah, maybe the manager knew what he was doing previously by taking him off, and maybe he should have rested him on this occasion. But I certainly wasn't screaming for that before the game, so I'm not going to criticise him for it.
Counterpoint, I mean, they were saying on the broadcast, and I don't know if you saw it from the stadium, Tim, but like they were saying, like midway through the first half, there's some concern about Lacazette. They're considering substituting him. There's some discussion on the sideline that Lacazette may be hurt, and then he plays the whole damn half. I mean, like, I'm sort of confused because if he opened up his groin, which is such a disgusting way of saying it, but it just rolls off the tongue nicely. If he did something to his groin, 20, 25 minutes into the half, I mean, why is he running around? I mean, he was still sprinting for balls all the way until the halftime whistle. Like, what was the thought process there?
Maybe. 'Cause all I noticed, I didn't actually notice him hobbling or carrying an injury. All I noticed was about 10 minutes before the end of the first half, I saw Giroud was the only one warming up. And I thought, that's got to... And there's only one player Giroud's going to come on for. And it didn't twig until half-time when Giroud was straight out and warming up with Shad Forsyth. And that's... if you're ever in the stadium, if one of the subs starts warming up with Shad Forsyth, it means they're coming on because he's giving them the once-over. But I didn't actually notice it because I'll tell you what I did notice. Aaron Ramsey got a knee in the hamstring about halfway through the first half. And he was not... I wouldn't say struggling, but... he was nursing it for about 10 to 15 minutes or so, and I think I was so worried about that I didn't really notice Lacazette. But yeah, you're right, and maybe Lacazette thought, do you know what, I keep getting taken off early, and no, I've got to stick this out. I've got to prove myself. I've got to prove that I can go the distance and I can take a knock. And
that leads to another question. I mean, because look, if you've done your muscle, you've done your muscle, and you're not. I mean, he's a professional. You're not going to run around on a torn hamstring and tear it right off the bone, like. A groin. So let me ask you this. I mean, any thought in your mind whatsoever that Arsene is sandbagging like he did with Ozil, where he said he certainly won't be ready for Wednesday? I mean, is there any thought in your mind that he did play the rest of the half? It couldn't have been that bad. He may be okay for Saturday, or you think that's my wishing stone talking there?
Yeah. Didn't he say he could be out for a while after that, which, I don't know. I know.
Well, if that's the case, I mean, I cannot understand the decision to let him finish the half. But I don't want to go down this road because we just had a 5-0 victory and there's a lot of better stuff to talk about. I mean, ultimately, though, Tim, I mean, just to finish up with you, you talk about, maybe we shouldn't have started the first 11 and we could have gotten the win without it, and now look, we're without Lacazette. But you know what? I record the games, and at the end of the season, there are probably, if I'm lucky, 3 or 4 I want to watch again. And this will be one I want to watch again. And, like, as fans, we want to see Wenger ball. We want to see beautiful football. We want to see goals scored. And, like, we aren't treated to too many of these a season. Like, isn't there an argument that, like, you should just enjoy it when these come? These performances are why we've loved this era, these 20 years of football, and they've been fewer and further between. These were great players doing great things. And instead of looking at it as we should have rotated for United, why can't we just enjoy it?
Yeah, I think that's a good argument. I think you look at the Europa League at the moment, and that's pretty short on entertainment, and that shows you. I mean, look at the difference with how Giroud played with that team compared to how he plays with the Europa League team. Wonderful flowing football around him, and he's less of a roadblock. And Arsenal actually, when you look at particularly the attack, the personnel's changed quite a lot this season. We've been fairly settled, maybe not so much in the back three. Where we've been settled is the midfield two and the wing backs. But up front, we haven't been settled, really. We've made a lot of changes there. And actually, if you're talking about fully realising the advantage of not completely participating in European competition, then it's not just the recovery and the fitness, it's getting that rhythm and that game time together. And particularly in this part of the season, when Arsenal are looking fairly fresh at the moment. And I know Jane Cavendish had a very good thread on Twitter about this about a week ago, where she was saying, yeah, exactly, where usually Arsenal have a qualifier or something, or they start their Champions League campaign and they have to go all out from August and they suffer a dip, whereas this time they've been able to, you get two peaks in a season, and what it looks like Arsenal are doing is aiming for December and April as opposed to August and February or something. So, but perhaps I think he probably just read it as well. Look, they haven't all played that much football. Let's really get this starting 11 together, and let's really get some rhythm. And that's probably, in his mind, he would have justified it as that's just as valuable as giving a couple of players a rest.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I enjoyed it. And I don't know if you know this, the goal of football is to enjoy watching it. So, mission accomplished. Clive, hello. So, the first goal, beautiful goal. And in a way, a lot of the things we haven't seen much from Arsenal, played right through the middle of the pitch, right through the middle of their defense, split them open with movement, straight through ball. Lacazette's movement is so important here. He pops up on the right half space. He gives the ball back into midfield. Xhaka plays a little dagger ball into Ramsey. Ramsey finds Lacazette running from central to the left half space into the box. And he's just so smooth in the box. Cool, cool control and finish. How much did you enjoy that goal? And is that the kind of goal that maybe has been missing a little bit from us this season?
We've got that goal in our locker. It's all about one touch, isn't it? One touch and movement. And the bit that I really liked about it was, again, Ramsey has got that flick in him, but it's nice when he's flicking it to somebody that's intelligent enough not to run past him, slightly hold his run so he can see him. And so the flick becomes easier to execute. Then he takes it into the box and then he controls his body, gets his stride pattern right. And sometimes with football, you can tell if someone's going to score. You can just tell by the way they approach the ball. And there wasn't many people watching him approach that ball thinking he's not going to score. Right? So and it ended up going in. It was a lovely goal, and it sort of just makes the game nice. To see that early goal go in, you sort of, the pressure's off. We can now play. We've probably got this one. And that's probably how the players felt. That's probably how the fans felt. And the players sort of maybe took on a little bit of that, thinking we've got this, but didn't quite go and push them over the edge immediately, and ended up being a little bit edgy towards the end of the first half. But I'm loving the time. I always say the similar thing. I always say a thing that Arsenal is a team of flow, and when we're flowing, it's all down to the least time we take on the ball. When
totally
I
agree.
a little story
right,
a few years ago. Yeah, I'll give you. My son was at an academy, and he played against Arsenal, and they beat us like 13-3. Right, it was under 14s, and the thing I noticed immediately was that the Arsenal players never held the ball more than 2 touches, and it's something that their coaches were shouting all the time: 1 touch, 1 touch, 2 touch, 2 touch, maximum 2 touch. You do touch to move off the spot to beat somebody. That's the only time you have 2 touches. The only people allowed to have more touch than 1 or 2 touches for the wingers, and a philosophy that goes throughout the club. And when you see it work, like some of the goals we saw yesterday, the ability to play 1 touch is so difficult because you've got to have a complete picture, complete body control, have the next pass in your mind as the ball's travelling to you. And when it's done like that, it looks so easy. The moment you start to see players have multiple touches is the moment we get into physical battles, and the moment we start to show the weaknesses in our game that we're not so good at. When you see the ball flying across the ground like that, then it's just like, wow, why can't we do that every week? It's just great to watch.
Yeah, and maybe, look, it may seem weird at this stage, but we've still been playing this formation, less than a year. 8 months or so, with a summer break. So whatever, we're probably 30 games into this formation. That front three is still just about learning each other. Ramsey and Shaq are just still starting to form the right partnership in the center midfield, and maybe we're starting to see it click. I don't think you can just change a formation like this and change roles and change positions on the pitch and expect everyone to know where everyone should be, and I think that's starting to happen. In terms of Lacazette, though, Clive, I thought he had a great first half, and I think it would be unfair to split this into we scored all the goals when Lacazette came off and we didn't score them when he was on, because I thought he was brilliant and his movement was hurtful. He got into spaces that hurt. Dare I say it, he played a little bit like an RVP, or maybe better put like a Thierry Henry in a way, because we saw him drop deep and give the ball and play considered passes and touch and move and then run. We saw him running behind. I thought that run he made to the end line where he tried to chip it back into goal from the end line, where it was cleared off the line and then Kolasinac just couldn't smash it in. That was brilliant. we're constantly evaluating this player because, first of all, you know, he only plays about an hour a game and he hasn't played in some of the big games. But was this half of football arguably his most impressive for us in some ways?
I think so. I was going to say exactly that. I think the effort that he put in defensively, which he always does from, you know, high up, but he followed people back deep, and just for half time he found himself in a strange area of the pitch in the right back corner. And I really like him, actually, and I haven't always been a fan. But I like how he's improving, and sometimes at Arsenal we don't see players improve. I think he's a very good link man that seems to be on the brain wavelength of some of our better players. And to have a centre forward that makes other players look better is really, really good. Because we've had debates about Giroud, for example, who does what he does very, very well. But I think he has a tendency to make other players not look so good and limit other players and in turn limit us, despite him having some very strong attributes. So, but with Lacazette, I think his whole movement is that of a team player and said, I want to make you look good. Knock it to me and I'll get us going again. I'll give you it back with information on it and then you can move it. And then I'll move over here and then I'll connect you this three over here. And then, by the way, if you want to play it down the sides, I'll run after it there as well. And I've got an idea what I'm going to do when I get into the box. You can cross it to me if I'm moving. You can give it to me any way you like, and I'm going to make you look good. And I really like that about him. I really like the team ethic he's got. And I see him as the Giroud alternative, big time, with more tools. And I think France is going to use him that way. I generally think he'll be the France starting centre forward next year. I think he'll have Griezmann and Mbappe all around him. I think that's going to be the front three, and I think Giroud will be the alternative there on certain occasions when maybe the team they're playing is not so good, and they're going to be pressed back into their box. But come the bigger games, I think Lacazette's going to play. Yeah, I think he just got more things he can bring, and I think I'm loving watching him. Of course, everything we're talking about here, I'm not sure I want to bring a doom and gloom into this, but I sort of said something on Twitter today.
You got to leave me space to do something, Clive. Come on.
Okay, man. Sorry. But all this emotion that we're feeling, which is quite nice, quite a nice surprise, a few nice things are happening. But there's like an emotional handbrake around basically the two boys that are making Lacazette's making good and making him look good.
Ozil and Lacazette.
That emotional handbrake is on. We don't quite want to let go, right? Because we know that we're not in the best potential position going forward, which is a shame because imagine if those Ozil and Sanchez had signed up 3 more years and we had this front three for at least 2 years. We'd all be massively excited right now.
But you know what's weird? Clive, I think we've fallen into this weird football manager, everybody wants to play director of football, plan the future of the club kind of role as fans now, where we have totally and completely lost the ability to live in the moment. And nobody's guaranteed another day. You could walk out into the street tomorrow and get hit by a bus. And actually, bad news, Clive, I can see the future. No, I'm just kidding. But we have these extraordinary players playing extraordinarily well, and instead of enjoying it, everybody's discussing whether they should be sold in January. What is wrong with saying we have them? They're incredible. I'm enjoying watching them. And I'm not the director of football at Arsenal, so it's not my job to replace them. So while we can intellectually debate who should replace them or how, I think once we decided to start this season with them, we should all just sit back and enjoy what we're getting, because you're not guaranteed players like this at your club.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. You could project that point out much further around football analysis, but you make a great point. But we are what we are based on the history of our club, and maybe since 2006, as a fan base, we've been worried about the financials because the financials around that we've had not been great, and the financials of some of our
such a good point
oil-rich competitors are unlimited, and so when we see dollars flowing out the roof, flowing out the window for nothing because we haven't made smart decisions, we can't help but feel that's going to make us even fall further behind, right?
But it's not our job, right? And that's why I'm so torn. You make such a good point, right? We all fell into the FFP myth. We went down the mythical FFP rabbit hole together, and now we all feel that we can only enjoy players if they were a bargain. And if they cost a lot of money, we have to worry if they re-sign or what we're selling them for. And meanwhile, they're actually playing football on the pitch and nobody's noticing. it's such a good point you make about how that changed us and the way we evaluate our players, but there has to be room for enjoying watching them play football.
You're absolutely right, but I can't help. I can't help my thought process. I can't help but think, could we get 25, 30 million for Theo Walcott, and then if we can get another 20 million for somebody else, and we can put that towards Fekir, who used to play with Lacazette at Lyon. I can't help my mind thinking that. But should I be worried about that? Maybe, probably not. But that's just
for
the
Theo,
way
I'm
my
okay
mind
with
runs
it.
away.
Yeah,
that's how my mind works.
Yeah, that's
right?
fine.
And then, it is a tough one. You're absolutely right. I think we need to enjoy the wins a little bit more, and we need to, as fan group, just say, look, this is quite good. Let's like it. We're coming to Saturday, which I can't get out of my head already. And there's a potential of another good day there. And
don't jinx it. Come on, Clive. Come on. Look, so getting back to the game action a little bit, Tim. Though I thought it was interesting. The first half was a weird half because we carved open all of this space. And my exact quote at halftime, I just want to read it out because this was what I wrote in my little notes I was taking. First, I wrote, great moves in little triangles on the edge of the final third, but no precision in the passing. This has been a bit ugly, but also on the verge of blowing their doors off. There's another gear here. They were chasing shadows, but we were letting them off the hook. And what I thought was interesting is I almost felt like the early goal took some of the pressure off, and then we were just kind of playing for fun. Right? I mean, there was one little move, I don't know if you remember it, where there was all this one-touch passing and then a one-touch pass into the air to Alexis over the top. Ozil played this scintillatingly gorgeous over-the-top ball behind the defense to Alexis, and Alexis tried to back flick it out of the air with his heel over to Lacazette. And we were trying some of this incredible, really impressive technical skills, but they weren't coming off. There was a lot of virtuoso play that was just, the passing was like an inch off, or the touch was an inch off, but we were trying it. It was fun to watch. But as a result, we were camping in their half. Xhaka was pushed way up, and they were getting a lot of pretty decent counterattacking opportunities. They squandered some moves where they really could have pulled that level on 3 or 4 occasions. Do you think that the early goal maybe had us playing a little too casually, a little too arrogantly at times, and that as beautiful as it was to watch, it was in equal parts a little bit frustrating?
Yeah, and this was something that the Invincibles used to do quite a lot. I've said this a lot.
Okay,
on this
I love
podcast.
That.
They used to win games 3-1 that they should have won 7-0 because they'd get to a certain point where they were enjoying it so much almost that they kind of take their eye off the ball a little. I thought the football we played in the first half an hour is the best I've seen us play for some time. And a lot of that might have come about as a result of the early goal, but I thought there was that kind of one-touch, quick stuff. And it was weird. It was like a game of 3/3, really. The first half an hour, I was looking at it thinking, yeah, we could win this 5-0. And then the 30 to 60 minutes, I was thinking, this could be 1-1. And then, of course, 60 to 90, we kind of went back to the beginning again. But I think what happened is very interesting, the way Arsenal set their stall out. They really, really pushed Granit Xhaka and Aaron Ramsey high up, and they tried to do exactly what they did against Chelsea in the cup final. And I haven't looked at any like average position maps or anything like that, but Xhaka and Ramsey were so high.
It's the furthest forward Xhaka's played in a long time from looking at it. Yeah.
What they were doing, exactly what they were doing against Chelsea, they were trying to push them back basically by standing. They knew Huddersfield would have like 2 banks of 4 or 4 and a 5. So they went and stood behind them, and it confused them. And actually what we've got, and Clive said this on the last podcast, what we've got are 3 centre-backs who can play. They're all good enough on the ball to play through the lines. So what was happening, instead of us playing in front of them, we were getting behind them really quickly because our 3 centre-backs were on the halfway line. We had, we spoke about a couple of weeks ago how Arsenal's attack just didn't have these lines like this kind of, there's your back 3, and then 15 yards forward is your midfield 2, with, the wing-backs perhaps pushed on a bit, and then your front 3. We had this thing, I forget which game it was, where everyone was just stood in a line. And actually our spacing was really good. So Ramsey and Xhaka were basically just going, right, instead of just like receiving the ball and looking at a wall of blue shirts, we're going to go and get behind that bank of 4 so that, and then Mustafi and Koscielny and Monreal were finding those kind of those what I think Wenger calls moderate value passes in behind them, and instantly they're on the back foot. We were just constantly getting up against their defence by basically just pushing them so far back that their midfield wasn't even a consideration. I think what happened was that Huddersfield wised up to that a little bit, and they started pressing our centre halves quite a bit more, and making those passes a little bit more difficult to find. And we got, they got on Xhaka as well, and we saw his passing began to suffer quite a bit. And then I think for about 5 to 10 minutes, his confidence went, and he was giving the ball away. And that rustled us a bit, I think, because we were getting through them so easily. And credit to Huddersfield, they saw it, they saw what was happening, and they fixed it. And I don't think we quite adjusted to that for a little while. So I think you're right. I think there was an element of perhaps it became a bit too easy. But I do also think that Huddersfield kind of recognised what was going on. We had a good original game plan, which Huddersfield then got wise to, and it took us a little while to sort that out, I think.
Yeah, I mean, do you think, like, maybe we talked about the ball moving very quickly, and there were a lot more one-touch passing right in the middle of the pitch, whereas a lot of times it's happening through Bellerin or through Kolasinac. Do you think some of that is because Xhaka was pushed up more close to Ramsey at times, or if not, they were still playing perpendicular to each other but further up the pitch, that there were just more central players on the edge of the final third to exchange those quicker passes, as opposed to when Xhaka drops a little deeper towards the halfway line, you have that one less body right there in the center of the final third to exchange those passes?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually what we're seeing from Ramsey and Xhaka is they're still not perfect, but they're actually quite versatile. So they can do that. And, again, Chelsea Cup final, that's the blueprint. They can push up together. And I know Clive did a good bit a couple of weeks ago on how they swap to mess up people's game plans. But they can also do, as they did against Swansea. They tried that in the first half against Swansea. It didn't really work. So they dropped Xhaka 10 yards further backwards and went, right, OK, Swansea are playing this way. Let's drop Xhaka closer to the centre halves and let's just have him hit the wing backs all the time. So Arsenal have kind of got two ways of playing it. They can just put Ramsey and Xhaka quite high up and perpendicular to one another. And if that doesn't work, then they can just drop, preferably Xhaka back and have him as more of a kind of quarterback. Because teams that kind of push up on him are more susceptible to the kind of the ball in behind. So if he's getting crowded out, 30 yards from the opposition goal, take him back 20 yards and he can find those crossfield balls. So they're still not a perfect midfield pairing, but what they've actually got is they've got a couple of ways of dealing with opponents, particularly in home games at the moment. I think we saw that yesterday as well.
Yeah, and just one last little thing. I mean, the one thing that is really hard to miss, I think you just can't miss it. Ozil and Alexis love playing together, don't they? I mean... The way they respond to each other's movement, the way they look for each other. And it's not to suggest that they aren't able to interact with the other players. They do, but there's really a special relationship there, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of new formation, I think, brings them a little bit closer together, kind of literally and metaphorically, because what we've done is we've kind of tried to bring out a bit more of Alexis's creative game. And again, it's given us kind of two different ways of approaching our creative game. Because I think, particularly since Cazorla went down, we've lacked that secondary creator. And what we've kind of done is we've turned Alexis into that secondary creator. And it's very fire and ice. It's very, if Alexis doesn't get you with his 50th attempted through ball, then Ozil will find some space that nobody else has seen. It's kind of, one of them will try and kick the door down and the other one will try and pick the lock. But you're right, they combine brilliantly. And I think that Alexis goal is so underrated. I thought that was such a superb goal. Brilliant ball by Ramsey. Brilliant cut back by Ozil. Fantastic finish by Sanchez. And that goal just felt like a return to Wenger ball, Yeah. And Alexis and Ozil, they're two players who can do that for us. And I think the form Ramsey's in at the moment, and Ramsey's developing the creative side of his game. His passing is getting much better. At the moment, things are good. and, and it's kind of coming off at the moment. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I mean, look, aside from the way the ball was played, some scintillating finishes too. I mean, Lacazette's finish is cool as you like. Ozil with a beautiful little chip, just so instinctive and natural. Alexis smashes into the roof of the net like he's on the training pitch. I mean, then of course Giroud taps in a few, whatever. But just beautiful stuff. And by the way, I mean, we mentioned Xhaka, but 125 passes at 91.2%. I mean, just hub and spoke. We went back to that hub and spoke, and Mesut Ozil, 5 key passes, 97 passes, 86%, 7 crosses. I mean, he filled up the stat sheet. So let's do this. I want to get into the Ramsey and Ozil thing a little bit more. So it's a good time to bring Scott in because he covers it comprehensively in his statistics segment. And then Clive, I want to talk to you about Ramsey, a player that you don't rate at all and have said really nasty stuff about. And I want to try to understand why you hate Aaron Ramsey. So we're going to go to Scott. We're going to talk stats. We'll come back and we'll find out what Clive's problem is with the Welsh. We'll be right back. I realize that sometimes it can be hard to tell, but statistically speaking, we were actually pretty dominant in the Huddersfield match and played pretty well. So while you may have missed that, it may have gone by you, we're going to invite Scott now to give you the statistics that will help you realize that actually we played quite well. So Scott is here. You can find him on Twitter at _that_crab. You can find his fine work on crabstats.blogspot.com. And Scott, incredibly, in a 5-0 victory, the stats suggest we played pretty well. Just starting from the top, on XG, it wasn't close.
No, not even remotely. So I had it 3.7 in the favor of Arsenal to 0.5 for Huddersfield. And I think that if you looked at it, I have another one that also looks at the shots on target. And Arsenal were at 4 in that one. So this definitely was a deserved spanking for Huddersfield. Yeah,
well, and, there's nothing I like more than a deserved spanking. Okay, so look, I mean, there were a lot of good things that happened in this match. I think 2 of the really bright performances were Ozil and Ramsey. And in a season where we've built a lot through the wide positions, through Bellerin, through Kolasinac, we did a lot through the middle today, and we did a lot through Ozil and Ramsey. And I think it's interesting because the very last game we were debating Alex Iwobi and how much creativity we lose. And then Mesut Ozil comes back and says, ding, 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 here I am with the creativity. So how scintillating was his performance statistically?
It basically broke all the metrics, how good he was. He's right at the top of all of the charts.
So it was like the Kim Kardashian paper magazine cover of creative statistics.
Pretty much, yeah. So I just wanted to touch on something. I know you just mentioned the building through the middle. I know we had talked about that during the Spurs match, how only 9% of the passes went through the midfield center compared to 14% for the year average. This game, it was all the way up to 22%. So, yeah, a real big difference in the number of passes through the middle this game.
Yeah, and so is that something we haven't really been doing? I mean, is the movement through the middle something that we've struggled with? I mean, what exactly do you think was? I mean, when you look at the statistics, I mean, were Bellerin and Kolasinac de-emphasized in this match?
They didn't quite have as number of touches as what they normally do, because they usually are among the top in our number of touches. For this game, they were still among the top, but we still saw Xhaka, Ramsey, and Ozil kind of take a little bit more of a front seat in this one, and those are more central players. Yeah,
I mean, we definitely associate Wenger ball with playing through the middle and the quick one-touch football and going right through the center of the pitch. And while wide positions are great and all that, when you're playing one-touch football through the middle of the pitch, it's really a joy to behold. And I think Ramsey, he's a player that divides opinion, but on his form this season, I think you kind of have to acknowledge that he's a crucial part of what we're doing. And this game, I thought he was really, really good. Obviously, he assists for the first goal. He played the through ball to Ozil that led to the who did he cross it to from there? What was it to Ozil? The through ball, Ramsey. Through
I believe it was. Yeah,
to Ozil,
the through ball for his assist.
Slides. Oh, it was for the Alexis goal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually had him with two through balls in this game, leading Arsenal.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could just see that he was everywhere. I mean, statistically speaking, did he put together a performance that maybe jumped off the paper for you a little bit?
Yeah, and so, I mean, if we want to talk a little bit more later about his season, I think that would deserve some mention.
Let's do it now. Yeah, I mean, what is Ramsey doing for us this season? For the people that are still on the fence about him, let's get them off the fence.
Basically, if you look at as a creative outlet, he is our third best creator behind Ozil and Alexis. So on a XA basis, he is third with. Let me find on my notes here where I wrote it down.
Find a way, my friend. We have all the time in the world.
Yeah.
We're going to try to do a long podcast on this one since, there's a big game coming up and you never know, it might not go our way. So we might as well revel in the 5-0.
Exactly. So he is third with 2.72 XA created for the season behind Ozil and Alexis. He is tied for second in number of big chances created with 5. He is also third in the number of key passes created. So basically, with Ozil and Alexis' future in doubt, I think it's even more important for Ramsey to be kind of locked down because he's another one of those guys that his contract is running out. But the other thing that he does is not just in the creative side, but he's also a huge factor in our offensive production. So he is going to be first or second in almost every other offensive category. So if you look at his shots, he's second behind Alexis. If you look at his XG, he's second behind Lacazette, and that's just 0.02 behind. So basically, he's tied. He has taken 7 big chances, which is tied for first with Lacazette. So basically, both offense and creating.
And that's really a testament to his running, right? Because those big chances come from him arriving into the box on time to be there for those big chances. I mean, it shows you how important his movement has been.
Exactly. He has a real good knack for popping up in places where he needs to be and where his teammates can find him for big chances.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing most of his shots on the season, if you shot chart it, are probably center of the box, right? Like they're not 25 yards out. They're not from wide positions. They're right there near around the penalty spot.
Exactly. No, his shot selection this year has been excellent, way better than it's been in the past. I'll tweet out his individual shot chart so people can go back and look at that.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
It's absolutely beautiful.
One statistic that we touched on in the Burnley game that I thought was interesting, you said Alex Iwobi played 1 pass from the middle zone into the final third zone. And those can be hurtful passes that build the play. And that you said Ozil averages about 15 to 20. I was curious if you have it handy. And if you don't, you can just say, I don't have that. Let's move on. But do you have any way to look at Ozil's passes from that middle third and the final third?
Yeah, so I did. So this one he was 9 for 10. So he didn't have the volume, but if you actually looked at that, I think one of the things that happened is that because
we were in their final third so much.
Yeah, Huddersfield got pushed back so far that our actual leader in final third entries was Laura Koscielny.
Wow.
So the fact that it's a center back who's making those passes is kind of just shows.
But even still,
where the actual. Where the actual possession was in the game. Yeah,
that's a great point. But I mean, even still, in a game where Ozil probably spent most of the game in the final third, he's still 9 for 10 on those entry balls. Where Iwobi played 1 in the Burnley game. I just think it still shows you how critical he is to getting into those spaces and then getting the ball into the final third and then running onto it, 1 touch. I mean, the movement and the exchanging of passes was brilliant, and the statistics seem to be bearing that out. And I was just curious, as we move forward. I mean, unfortunately, Lacazette won't be available for the United game, which is really heartbreaking, but we're starting to now have a little bit of data and a little bit of experience with the big 3 up front, Ozil, Alexis, Lacazette. And my eye test tells me we're a better team with them out there. Do you happen to have anything, I mean, like maybe XG per 90 with those 3 versus our XG per 90 generally? I mean, is the data telling you what my eyes are telling me, which is that we are just a more effective team attacking when those 3 get to be on the pitch together?
Yeah, so earlier in the week we talked about the with and without Ozil. So I did a very similar thing. So this is with the AOL combination.
Wait, let me just see if I've got that right. That would be Alexis, Ozil, Lacazette?
that'd be right.
Okay, hopefully they don't go the way of AOL itself, but all right.
Yeah. So without them, Arsenal are creating 1.5 XG per game. They're shooting 15 times, and they create 2 big chances.
All right, so wait, so 1.5 XG per game, 1.5 expected goals. They're getting 15 shots a game, you said?
Yep.
And one.
So this is Arsenal without the
without
big 3,
right? And how many 2 big chances a game?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
right.
This is so when they all start together, and this number is going to kind of blow you away. They create 3.1 XG per game. They take 20 shots per game and 4.75.
Holy cow!
Big chances.
Now I realize sample size warning. Obviously, they haven't played together a lot, and I'm sure some of that is skewed by the fact that Everton game was a bit of a rout. Although there's no saying that it would have been a rout with the other group. But that is, I mean, Scott, that's not a statistically, minor difference. I mean, I don't know what you data nerds call that, but I call that a holy shit amount of difference.
Yeah. So if you want to even go to looking at when they play together, they have a few more matches that they've played together at the same time. And so the XG when they play together is 2.5, 18 shots per game, and 3 big chances per game.
Still a significant uptick. So what my eyes tell me is that we're better when those 3 are together, and what the data suggests is we are significantly better when those 3 are together. And that really is interesting. And I mean, I think it just goes to show you that in football, having your best players on the pitch can help you be a better team. So for all you up-and-coming managers out there, there's a little inside tidbit. If you play your best players, you will be a better team. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, it's one of those things that's kind of hard to understand why you would want your best players all at the pitch at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Unfortunately, because I have like a job that pays me more than this free podcast, I'm pressed for time, and I have to get with the panel, the group, to record the main section of the pod. So, Scott, I think that's a tasty morsel of goodness to cover all the wonderful things about Arsenal statistically, and we will definitely dive a little deeper after the United game and unpack how we were able to get 6 past De Gea. I mean, I'm guessing Coughlin double hat trick, but you never know. In any event, Scott's on Twitter, @O_that_crab. You can find his work at crabstats.blogspot.com. He will tweet out Aaron Ramsey's shot chart. You don't want to miss it. Scott, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And we'll talk to you after United.
Bye.
Okay, so as Scott pointed out, and I know your eyes and the scoreline probably couldn't tell you this, but once we look at the data and dig into it, it turns out we played well. So, Clive, why do you hate Aaron Ramsey?
I don't hate him.
Oh, okay, all right. So let me ask that in a more progressive way. Aaron Ramsey has really grown into this role. He is having an extraordinary season. He's second or third in every creative attacking stat. He's covering the whole pitch. He leads us, I think, in big chances. He's perfected those late runs into the box. His through ball to Ozil, the pre-assist, so to speak, for the Alexis goal was stunningly beautiful. The flick around the corner to Lacazette on the edge of the box. Paul has always said, and I hate to give Paul credit because I disagree with 90% of what he says and just with him as a human being, but he does make the point that Aaron Ramsey is the kind of player that when he stays fit and starts to get a run of games, then you see the best out of him. Are we seeing a dominant Aaron Ramsey now and the difference that can make for us?
Yeah. The Europa League has saved Aaron Ramsey. As simple as that. I mean, even last night, Wenger took him off after 75 because he wants to protect him. He knows he's delicate. He knows he's an athlete that covers lots of miles. He's quite metronomic in his movement, so he pushes himself to the physical limit. And 3 games in 7-8 days has just never worked for him. Then we lose him for 3 weeks. He comes back rusty. He tries to come back and do exactly what he always does, breaks down again, and he's just not getting any continuity. And then, funny enough, your eyes don't lie with him. You could just see how he runs and the way he moves, and you know he's going to play well because of how he's moving. When he's not playing well, he labours in his running and he rocks from side to side. And because of his personality, he will always try to get places where sometimes his body can't get him to. And he puts himself into areas where he hasn't got the fast twitch sprinting fibres to be the exterior of teams and run beyond people when he gets there too early. And so for my issues with Ramsey has always been stylistically rather than and his style versus what the game requires. And what's happening now is, as Tim has already alluded to, I think within this formation, he has got a number of ways of playing, and more of his strengths are showing up because he's allowed to, and he's actually told to push teams back. When I first saw him doing this, I kept thinking, what are you doing? Why are you so high? And when we get caught out, it doesn't look good. But now I'm realising, actually, this is by design. This is about putting teams into areas where we want them to be. And to do that, you have to be brave in your movement, breaking through third man runs. Even if you're not getting the ball, it just sends a message out to people to say, we're coming for you, and you sit there. And once you're there, around the edge of the area, we're quite good at one-touch passing and playing through you. So I think he definitely looks fitter. He definitely looks stronger. But what I like, he seems to be improving on many aspects. His technical security is getting better. He's developing moves to turn away from people. His weight of pass is getting better. He still does the odd stupid thing, but at least he tries things. And I mean, I really appreciate that. I mean, the Burnley game, 0-0, freezing cold, and he just kept making runs. And he makes the run, gets the penalty, we get the 3 points. I mean, things like that. For all the things he doesn't do so well, you have to appreciate when he does something well like that. And I think I love to see players improve. I love to see players develop their game. And it looks as though he's not resting on his laurels. He's developing physically again, which I think he's at a peak now he hasn't been at for many years. And technically, I think he's really improving on things that I didn't think he had. And weight of pass is one of them. And Tim's always been a big supporter of Aaron Ramsey. And what I started to do, a couple of friends of mine are very big supporters of Aaron Ramsey. And what I started to do was look at his whole game. And I thought, okay, well, you can play deep midfield and spray the ball. You can play number 8. You have played on the right. You've had a couple of goes on the left. And you've had a couple of goes in number 10. And you can be a scoring midfielder. You can be a passing midfielder. And you can also tackle. And when somebody can do all of those things, then all he's got to learn is the tactical maturity to know when to apply all those attributes. And that was my initial frustration. And what we're seeing more now is that he's applying himself to exactly by what the game is telling him to do, rather than just doing what he always wants to do and run around like a teenager. So you've got to say, I'm really impressed with him. And you know, he's a key player for us at the weekend, and he's a key player for us going forward. And it will be interesting to see if he gets a contract, Elliot. And that's the next one.
Well, it's funny. Everybody's like, oh, you know, Ozil and Alexis are playing so well because they're putting themselves in the shop window. I got bad news for you. They don't need to be in the shop window. They're going somewhere in the summer. Ramsey has put himself in the shop window like a motherfucker. And it reminds me a little bit of the Theo contract renegotiation. Do you guys remember Theo hit a rich vein of form right around the time when we had to renegotiate his contract? And we had lost a lot of key players. And Arsenal were in the tough spot of having to give Theo a big deal because we just couldn't let him go. The optics of letting him go would have been bad, right? Mm-hmm. You guys remember that? So he had been playing center forward a little. He gets a new contract. He's in a rich vein of form. And now that's kind of been a millstone for us, right? I'm not saying Ramsey will be a millstone around our neck, but similar situation. We're about to lose our 2 stars. We can't afford the optics of losing Ramsey too. He's playing really well right now. We're going to wind up giving Aaron Ramsey $200,000 a week. And
rumors are he's turned down the contract already. And
well, I mean,
and they are. Who would you sign? Why would you?
No, I mean, look, he may go. But if he stays, it's going to be on big money. And I think we're in that situation again where it could work out great, and he could be captain material and a leader for us to becoming a title challenger again, or we could be in the Theo boat where this is more the purple patch than the regular form. And I'm not saying that, by the way. I'm not saying that's what will happen, but it is. Do you guys? I mean, Tim, do you see the parallel there? You know what I'm saying with being in a situation with a player who's hit good form right at the time where optics really support him having a lot of leverage for us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a kind of. I still don't think Theo was quite this player, but you know, one of your secondary players.
Conditions.
Yeah. One of your secondary players.
We don't have to dive. I feel like that's an answer. Unless you want to dive into that, we have other things we can get to. But I just wanted to see if you kind of saw it my way, so I can feel validated and then sleep well at night.
You feel good?
I feel good. Yeah, I feel good. Thanks. So, Ramsey has been hugely important. Tim, do you want to tag on to Clive's brilliant Ramsey section just in terms of the step forward he's taken? And maybe, are the Ramsey games where we really see him being influential and really dominating, do they coincide with good Xhaka games? When Xhaka is passing at 90% and completing 125 or making 125 passes in a game, it gives Ramsey the freedom to make more of those runs, to move around more, to get into the hurtful spaces. When Xhaka is passing at 70% and doesn't have the game by the scruff of the neck as much, doesn't have control of the midfield, then Ramsey has to drop a little deeper, has to come back into midfield, can't make some of those moves and those runs and link up at the edge of the box.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of reminds me a little bit of another player that I absolutely loved that was quite divisive, Alexander Hleb. And actually,
you mean Barcelona's Alexander Hleb? Yeah. Or Birmingham City's Alexander Hleb?
Bate Borisov's Alexander Hleb.
Oh, that one. Okay.
And what started happening was that when Fabregas had his breakout season in terms of goal scoring, what started happening was that Fabregas realised he could give Alex Hleb the ball and run forward, and he didn't have to worry about having to turn on his heels and sprint back again. And that's probably a neat comparison to what you're talking about there with Xhaka. You know, Ramsey pushing on is not a problem if we don't lose the ball effectively. But I do think he's become a bit more considered in that, and what I think he's become slightly better at is reading the game and reading when to do that, and not just doing it from the first minute to the last and just running up front. He's got better at picking the moment, but I think he's always had that in him. But what's really pleased me, I think, is he's a bit more kind of defensively responsible and secure. But it's the technical side of his game. I saw it a couple of seasons ago in him, actually. I saw, I think towards the end of the 14-15 season when like Walcott was kind of playing up front, and he started to find a way of kind of hitting Walcott from fairly deep areas, and I thought, he's developing like a real passing game here. And then, I don't know, maybe he's just too focused on the kind of, I want to be a goal scorer, I want to be Brian Robson, I want to be Steven Gerrard. But it kind of, I've always felt that Aaron Ramsey is a brilliant all-round midfielder who perhaps has done himself a disservice by focusing on just one of his attributes for the last couple of years. And it kind of,
which is missing big chances.
Yeah, it's been like, I want to be Steven Gerrard. And I thought, some of the best football he played in the last few years was when he was out on the right. But he's got that weird thing that all footballers have got. He's got that weird thing that all footballers have got because they never grow up. They always, I want to be the centre forward. I want to play in the centre, and it doesn't matter how important or crucial they are playing out wide. They want that status thing of, no, I'm in the centre because they're children and they don't really emotionally or intellectually grow up. But it feels like he's getting that maturity, and he's realising that actually he's got all the tools that you really need in a midfielder. And actually, I think he's an excellent tackler as well. He hasn't focused on that enough. He can do everything. And it feels like, and maybe it's just a rhythm thing, maybe it's just because he is playing every week now, and he's not had an injury yet this season. And maybe he's, a bit like, I think Nacho, for example, he's someone who's really benefited from just playing 90 minutes every single week, same position, knows it inside out. You can really see that in his display. And I think, I think, again, I'd kind of side with Paul in absentia that we're beginning to see that a bit with Ramsey. And we're seeing both sides of his game. When we need him to be a bit disciplined, like against Chelsea, against Spurs, he's able to do it. And we'll probably need him to do that a bit again on Saturday because United will look to hit us on the counter. And I've got faith that he'll do that.
Yeah, I don't know what Paul's abstinence has to do with that, but yeah, I agree with everything you said. So we got to talk Mesut Ozil though, and we're way too far into the show to not have talked Mesut Ozil, and we're all going to get a swing at this, but he did it again. I mean, he as much as Mesut Ozil can take a game by the scruff of the neck, he did. He was brilliant in the first half and still found another gear in the second half. And when he's on form like this, it's unlike any other player I can think of. He is a devastating player cerebrally with little touches and intricate movement and clever skills, and it is such a joy to watch. You know, Alexis makes himself noticeable. It doesn't always come off, but he never goes unnoticed. I mean, Ozil just drips quality on the game in ways that are so subtle, and I know that subtlety has almost become like a meme, but I think that's also because sometimes, you know, there is that debate with Ozil. You say, oh, you're not sophisticated enough to see what he's doing. But Tim, I think you made this point. When Ozil is doing it, you don't have to have some sophisticated footballing eye to see it. So let's dive into Ozil. And before we get into the bad of Ozil or the, why for of Ozil, let's just talk this game for a minute. At this level, it's funny. Last pod, we talked about Alex Iwobi, nice player, has good qualities, not Mesut Ozil, and we missed so much creativity. This game is just another reminder, right? I mean, this was Ozil dominating a match in the way that only he can.
Yeah, and even in that period where we went into a bit of a lull, he was the only player that didn't. And it was that kind of performance that people asked for where, like you say, he takes the game by the scruff of the neck. And you look at those three quickfire goals, he's at the absolute epicenter of all of them. And one of the stats I found really interesting, because, a lot of people, even Arsene Wenger said something like, he showed that he can fight. And he said something like, when you chase back, the crowd are behind you. And that's a very English thing. And obviously, that's open to a lot of ridicule, and quite a lot of it rightly so. But at the same time, I think people go too far the other way. And with Ozil in particular, but the stat that really interested me is everyone recognised that, he was tracking back when needed. It wasn't actually needed that often. It was only about twice. Because of the position he plays, it's not demanded all of the time. It's not necessary a lot of the time. It's just occasional. But he didn't commit a single tackle, which you don't always have to be valuable defensively and in terms of tracking back. But obviously, in terms of what he produced going forward, this wasn't one of those, I looked at the highlights or I looked at the stats and it turns out Ozil played quite well. That, this was absolutely, it's weird because, he doesn't go at full throttle really. He's a player that moves in a very weird, subtle way. But he was, the word I'd use is buzzing. He doesn't do that like sprinting, but when he's on form like this, he buzzes. You can almost see him like visibly vibrating, moving around the pitch, all one touch, no look passes, flicks around the corner, all this kind of, and it doesn't look like showmanship when he does it either. It just looks so natural. And maybe that works against him sometimes when he plays like this. It looks so natural that even when he's just good, it doesn't quite look as easy as this. And yeah, he was just absolutely sensational. He was everywhere. He was all over the pitch. He runs more than he gets credit for running. And the problem is when he doesn't run, he has this weird way of walking and kind of like slumping his shoulders so you notice him not running. Yeah. But he does run. And you know what? A phrase you used, I think, last season when we were having one of our hundreds of discussions about the likes of Coquelin and Giroud, was that they're players that don't fit your eye, I think was the phrase you used. And so you can appreciate what they bring to the team and why it's important at times, but on an aesthetic level, you just don't really enjoy watching them. And I had kind of the opposite thing with Alex Lacazette, where I don't really care. I don't really want to have a debate with anyone about how effective he was or how frustrating he was. I just loved watching him play. But when you use a phrase like that, I totally understand, and I think everyone relates to, a player that doesn't fit your eye. When we talk about football, we think there are two very important things. There's thinking and there's feeling. And thinking is the most important of the two, but there is an element of feeling, and that's not unimportant. And I think the thing is with Ozil, everybody thinks he's good. Everybody knows he's good. Most people are smart enough to see what he does and think, yeah, this player is really, really good. I think where he's possibly suffers is that he doesn't make people feel good. And that doesn't mean, and the problem is the Ozil debate has become contaminated, right? Because and I say this about him, he's not above tracking his runner, he's not above doing his work off the ball, in the same way that a goalkeeper can't just keep lumping the ball out of play and say, oh, what do you want me to pass to you for? I'm a goalkeeper, I keep the ball out. Or if the centre-halves just keep lumping the ball up front and say, we're defenders, don't ask us to pass. In the same respect, Ozil is not above doing a little bit of off-the-ball work, and he has the freest, least responsible kind of role on the pitch, and therefore he doesn't have to do it very often. But this debate is contaminated, right? Because when you say that, people say like, oh, you just want him to be Scott Parker, and it's like, no, there's an enormous grey area in there somewhere. And I think the thing is, last night when you see, and like I said, it only happened like twice, maybe 3 times, him chase back, it does kind of unfortunately highlight that he doesn't do it the times that he doesn't do it. And even Wenger said in his post-match comments, he showed that he's capable of that, and that's when people will fully get behind him. And it's not about turning him into Flamini or Parker, it's about just that little 1 to 2% extra. And we saw that last night. We absolutely saw that, and we saw that a little bit in his off-the-ball performance. And yes, that's not the most important thing with Ozil, but where it's important is it translated into his on-the-ball performance, because he was, even by his own exalted standards, he was incredibly productive. And that's what happens when you're really motivated and you're wired by the game. You become more creative, you buzz around a bit more, you become more productive. And that's why it's valuable for him to, just go into the occasional tackle, go into the occasional shoulder charge, because it does G you up a little bit, And
yeah, of course.
He doesn't have to become a destroyer. Just do that like once or twice a game, and that's fine. And if it gives you that little kind of extra 2%, then it will benefit his more creative, more cerebral gifts as well.
Yeah, and I do wonder if Ozil is a player who comes alive a little more when the players around him excite him. I mean, I know that's unfair. Maybe I'm giving him too easy a ride, but this is a player who arrived at Arsenal and was immediately trying to lay on chances for Theo Walcott, whose idea of running is, I'm going to run very fast, very straight. Olivier Giroud, who can't run him behind. Oxlade-Chamberlain. Right? I mean, who are the players that Ozil was giving chance for? I mean, he started a game in the knockout round of the Champions League against Bayern with Yaya Sanogo up front. Like, I do think that when Alexis and Ozil are on the pitch together, for example, you see a different Ozil. And the one thing that I think Ozil does for us is he gives us a better Alexis in this respect. Look at Alexis against Burnley when Iwobi was in there. He was popping up everywhere. He was trying to play the killer ball every time. And look, that's a little bit of Alexis, period. But Ozil takes so much of that responsibility off Alexis, and I think we get better contribution from him when he's finding his role in the game instead of just trying to be the whole attack in one player. And so they really do complement each other that way. I mean, Clive, as far as Ozil goes, I mean, is it simply a case of he's had it so comfortable at Arsenal? I mean, we give him a winter break every year. He gets to be ill for the Burnley match, and he may actually have been ill for the Burnley match, but, he kind of sort of gets to pick and choose when he wants to play and when he wants to be there. And is it just possible that Arsene has been too much of a player's manager with Ozil, and that it's been comfortable enough that he's kind of had the chance to decide when he wants to turn up and when he doesn't? I mean, he hasn't finished seasons as strongly. This is a guy who's on pace to shatter the assist record a couple seasons ago, and then got like one more during the run-in. Like, are we? I know LeGrove had said, can you mention, that Mesut Ozil is a first-half player who fades in the second half of seasons and doesn't seem to fancy it once a title challenge is gone or something. I mean, do you think that Mesut Ozil's talent is overshadowed by a lack of willingness to do it every game?
I don't buy into that bit. I think he's been self-indulged in the past, and we all sort of know it. So when you see a player being self-indulged and then suddenly you lose an away game at Man City and he's not running back, it almost gives you an excuse to have a go. Do you know what I mean? And I think people have done that because we want the team to win. And then we look around at the flagship players. If they don't do it, they get the ones that get paid the most and cost the most, they get the most stick, right? So, and that's just the way it goes. I think from my own personal angle, I think Ozil for me has been probably one of my top 5 favourite ever players I've ever seen at Arsenal. Right?
I would say my first 4 are some mix of Thierry Henry and Cesc Fabregas, and then
he's top 5 for me, man. And the reason why is because I've watched football for many, many years. I'm firmly ensconced in my middle age. I've seen all different types of players, but I've not seen a player like him. And I've just not seen a player that I can learn so much from about movement, about awareness, about control, about finishing, different types of finishing, pace of pass is perfect every time. How he's like just 2 or 3 passes ahead. And if you watch him, you can really learn about football. You can really learn about the intricacies of the game, the patterns, how he sees patterns, how he flips. I watched him in the game. It's a simple game, but I think it was against Swansea. And sometimes when you go live, you really pick things. And I just remember looking at the Swansea. He was playing on our right, and the Swansea right back was in a bit of trouble. So he just trotted over the other side, got close to the players over there, pass, job done, in behind. He just knows where to go. So when you have him, you have to know what you've got and what he provides. And football is he makes football look very, very easy, but it's actually very, very difficult. And what he does is he's almost like the oil to our engine. So the difficult pass, the difficult receipt of the ball, the difficult action, if it goes through him, it comes out the other side clean. It's like you throw him a dirty ball, it comes out clean, and we go from there. And that makes us flow, and that is Arsene Wenger football. It's flow-based, and he's a flow player, and the ball just goes through him. And I do think he's just very unique to watch. But I'm afraid with our English eyes, we sometimes demand something else. And when we don't see that, we're quick to criticise, when what we should be doing is learning about what we've seen, what he does, and thinking, can we add that to some of the British attributes that we have in England? Can we add that to more players and really educate them rather than kill him for being slightly different to what we're used to? So, I'm a huge fan.
You made a good point, actually. You start to think about it. You start to try to name favorite players in the Arsene Wenger era, and there's, of course, Bergkamp and Vieira and Thierry Henry, and for me, Cesc Fabregas. I know some people have given up on him, but he is my love child, and I will never give up on him. And you can think of just some of those incredible players that were there. Pires, of course, and I mean, I don't know how people will look back on Alexis. I think Van Persie, because of all the injuries and the brief period where he was exceptional, followed by the way he left, makes it impossible for me to look back on him positively. But Ozil has been a complex player for me, because when he is brilliant, he is so enjoyable to watch. And yet he has a resume of big games where he has been such a disappointment. And that is complicated. I mean, that complicates it. Whereas, Alexis, I have an affinity for that player just because of the way he steps up in the big moment. I don't know. That's a tough one to say. I mean, Tim, kind of a weird question, but assume they both go. Who's the harder player to replace? I mean, any way you look at it, Alexis's XG plus XA is elite. His output, I know people don't like that he gives the ball away, that he can be sloppy. They always a selfish, see you next Tuesday. He is at the absolute top of European football in terms of output, period. There's no debating it. And he will win you a match. He could, look, Mesut Ozil can lay on 25 key passes, and if no one scores the goal, it doesn't matter. Who's the harder player to replace?
I still think marginally it's Alexis, just because he does both. He creates and he scores. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Bergkamp Henry thing, in that, and like Ozil's like Bergkamp and Alexis is like Henry, in that I always felt that Bergkamp had the higher ceiling, and Bergkamp's best game was better than Henry's best game. He was capable of more. But in terms of consistent output, Henry did it more often than Bergkamp. It's just when Bergkamp did it, he did things that Henry couldn't do. And I feel like it's kind of the same here. I feel like Ozil's ceiling, he's certainly technically a far better footballer, and his ceiling is higher. But I just think Alexis produces more often. So if they both have their best game, Ozil's going to have the better game of the two. But over a season, I think Alexis will give you slightly more. But yeah, it's such a. It would be it's not going to happen, but it would be such an enormous boost just to keep one of them and be able to build around them. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen. So. Really, let's enjoy them while we've got them.
Yeah, and I think what I would say is, if you drop Ozil into a sensational team, he can probably be more impactful than dropping Alexis into a sensational team.
Yeah,
but if you have a middling team and you can only have one of them, Alexis can raise the level of a middling team by scoring 25 goals and laying on 10 assists. And doing a lot of it on his own. I mean, we've seen Alexis do it on his own. Ozil, I don't know.
The final piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and I mean, so look, let's not get into the morbid issue of which one of these two fantastic players we got to live without. Okay, Clive, fine, what?
I just want to say something on the goal, really, Ozil's goal, and when he ran through, and your eyes said, chip it, chip it, chip it. But he didn't chip it. He bounced the ball over the goalkeeper.
Yeah, it was incredible. Yeah.
I mean, that is the last thing you do. You chip it, you get yourself off the ground in case you get your legs broke. He's got the calmness to run in and bounce it over the goalkeeper. I mean, the goalkeeper's thinking, what's he just done there? And I mean, that sort of stuff is what I'm talking about. That is unique.
Well, it's like that was it the Ludogorets goal where he put 35 guys on their butts and still had the composure to round the keeper and put it in?
I just haven't seen that before. I haven't seen those movements. And from watching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players, I've just not seen anyone do that. I've just not seen some of the things he can do. And that's what I mean by one of my top 5 players ever, because I learned so much from watching him play.
And what I like,
the genes.
I think what we've been missing is penalty box players who are cool in the penalty box. Alexis Lacazette, and to some extent Ozil, not always, have an ability to slow the game down in the penalty box and be cool in that moment. Now, Ozil sometimes doesn't do that, but we've seen it with Lacazette. Alexis can certainly do it, and Ozil showed it in this game, and it was brilliant to watch. Now, look, just a couple quick codas on the game. One is Giroud. I think the fact that he came in and he played in a side that was clicking and everything was clicking over, and he did get a couple of, I'm not trying to take it away from him, but sort of easy goals. Now, admittedly, you've got to be in the right place to score those easy goals. He takes one off of Kolasinac's foot. He has another one that he slides home pretty nicely. But, I mean, Clive, do you think, is Giroud popping up in the right spot a few times in the second half of a game where we were already rampant going to ultimately mean that he gets the start against United over Welbeck, or do you think the manager will still go for the mobility and the energy and the running of Welbeck?
Well, I hope he goes for the mobility and the energy and running of Welbeck. I really hope he does, because we are going to need to have some sort of running presence against Manchester United, who are going to be looking to put us in areas where we don't want to be. So I hope he doesn't kill us by playing a non-running body up front, when Ozil and Sanchez have had Lacazette, who's fluid in his movement. I know Welbeck isn't as fluid, but he can move. Right? So it's really important that we mirror this style as close as we can. And in some ways, Manchester United are a very big, strong, physical team. Welbeck could be very much suited to this game. I'm sure Lacazette is as well. But if he plays him, I think we'll be fine. But he has to play him. He has to start with his energy and then bring Giroud on later on when one of the front three fade. But I'm hoping he does it. If he doesn't, I'll be really disappointed. If Giroud comes in and basically kills it, then I'll be quiet. And Giroud is a streaky scorer, but I go Welbeck every time.
Any thought that he goes Alexis up front and maybe brings Iwobi in and goes Iwobi and Ozil together, or something like that, some unexpected permutation of that front three?
I hope not. I don't mind when Welbeck plays, and sometimes him and Alexis swap. I quite like that, when sometimes Alexis goes up front and then Welbeck goes left and Welbeck goes up front. I want to see that. I want to create some problems for them. I want them to not know what's happening. I think their right-sided centre-back, Linda, or whatever his name is, he needs killing. So I want to get onto him.
I think their manager could use killing personally, but look, tomato.
Their back three are not great, and they don't play it in an advanced way as we do. So I really want to get in that side, and we are very left-sided biased. So I tell you what, they better get their right centre half right, because if they don't, I think we're going to get them.
Yeah, one little sneaky under the radar kind of thing about this game too, by the way, Kolasinac, his passing's been really poor, and we were praising him early in the season for doing what Gibbs never did, what Ox didn't do, what we've been missing, which is once you get into that final third as that left wing back, playing the smart cutback, the cool pass, looking up, spotting a man, and he really didn't do that. He got into a lot of good places, and then look, he got better as the game wore on, and he had that little jink move in the box that led to the Giroud goal, and I thought he improved, but still passing in the 60% range or something like that, and hopefully it's just a little blip for him, because the running is good, the energy is good, the power is good, but he needs to get back to executing a little bit better. Final thing, Tim. Well, first of all, just give you a quick word on what you think he'll do for United. I mean, no chance he sits Ozil for this, right?
No. I really don't know. I wouldn't be surprised by either Welbeck or Giroud. I tend to think he might just give Giroud the start, and I'm going to hate Olivier Giroud forever for scoring twice last night, because I'd written something about how he should have left in the summer and how he can't play in this attack anymore. And now we don't have Chamberlain whipping in crosses. There's not really much of a way for him to score, and he goes and scores twice on the end of free-flowing moves. And
by the way, welcome to the Hate Olivier Giroud Forever Club. I'll send you your welcome packet, things like that. So, just kidding.
But maybe Wenger will think, well, actually, he did just get on the end of a couple of free-flowing moves. I don't think Jose Mourinho's Manchester United are going to give us as much space as Huddersfield did. If we play Giroud, I hope we're not tempted to just try and chuck crosses into him, and that they do try and... See, the thing is, if we play Welbeck, there's at least some tactical continuity. If we play Giroud, potentially there's less of that, but this might be a game of few chances, and you'd probably back Giroud to take a chance over Welbeck. So it's fairly difficult. I would definitely play Welbeck and bring Giroud on a bit later in the game. But I said that in the FA Cup semi-final against City, and actually what we did was we started Giroud and brought Welbeck on later on, and that worked quite well for us. So I tend to think whoever starts won't play for 90 minutes. But personally, I would prefer to see Welbeck try and do a passable impression of Lacazette for 70 minutes and then perhaps bring Giroud on at the end.
Yeah, I would be okay with that, and I hope you will go with that. And so before we say goodbye, I think we should at least mention Arsenal keep adding to the backroom staff. They keep adding to the structure. They keep building a structure that we have been crying out for. We signed Barcelona's former director of football, Raul, last name, and he is not the director of football. He is the director of football relations, or the head of football relations, because Arsene Wenger doesn't like the title director of football. But Clive, and I don't want to go on any longer, so just really quickly, the club's been crying out for this kind of structure we're putting into place can only mean good things for not just succession planning, but getting more out of Arsene into his final few years, right?
Yep, I just demanded more people, and when you get more good people, you get people with a network, and our network is aged like some of the people that we have, so it may not be as modern as it once were. So straight away we have a new scout that's got modern network. We have a new director, whatever you want to call him. He's got modern contacts. They're both in their mid-40s, so we've dropped the age straight away of some of our key people. Yeah. And that's all I want. I just want to see
modernize
new people, new ideas, with new networks that makes us look like, oh, it's the beginning of a project here. It makes us a little bit more attractive, and we're not so wrapped up in the manager's performance. If he loses 2 games, then the club falls down because we're all wrapped up in one man. And I don't want that. We're a club.
Yep.
We're not a one-man machine, and we're looking like a club again, which is really promising.
Huzzah! Yeah, well said. And We have been critical of Ivan Gazidis at times. I think after he was overruled on the Arsene Wenger contract renewal thing, there was a question of whether his position had become untenable. And I think we owe Ivan Gazidis at least a little bit of appreciation, because it looks like, and if this is coming from him anyway, that he is getting things done at the club the way he would like to get them done, working with a man who I would question whether they have much love lost for each other. So it's good to see that it's working out. I predicted Arsenal 10, Huddersfield 0. So I am predicting Arsenal 15, Manchester United 0. And we'll see if it works the same way. In any event, Tim's on Twitter at Stilberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure.
Yep. And Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Buonasera, gentlemen, which, as you know, is Dutch for "it was a pleasure speaking with you." My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Give us a 5-star review. Mash the screen until it breaks so you can't unsubscribe from the podcast. And then when you get your new phone, you can go in and write a negative description about Paul in the podcast review description. Any event, it's United at the weekend. Quick reminder, Jose Mourinho is a huge cunt, and I hope he loses. We'll talk to you then. Cheers.